Good morning, or whatever it is, wherever you are. So, yesterday I had all kinds of problems. I found out after the fact that at some point, I don't know exactly when, Windows reset my system mic volume to max. SCFdiv, thank you for the host. So the reason I was seeing it all blown out was not because I have a gain filter on my back away room mic. It was because the mic was really, really loud and not sounding too good. And Osrak Gaming, thank you for the host as well. So I got that fixed. I also realized last night I forgot to turn off the camera gain adjustments. So right now I just left those alone. I don't know if I should better read anything. I did change the camera resolution because I'm actually at above 720 right now. So maybe the X detail will help. Just going on a really low frame rate because I can't handle high bit rates. So where I'm at now is I've got a very rough outline that's getting me like halfway through the allotted time. I've got other topics I can talk about, but I want to make sure I elaborate on these a bit before I spend too much time building up other topics. So first thing to do today is rehearse a bit. Oh yeah, camera's over here now. Of course, I'm also watching myself on there. Review a bit, hopefully with a fresh perspective. I'll be stumbling over bits and figuring out where I need to correct those. Which might create some diversions to go fix those. Get this out a little bit closer. Hopefully not too loud. Oh, it goes down so far. Try and get my head out of the way a little bit. So I have to figure out exactly how I want to structure this opening part, and I might actually need to break it out to points at least for this, even though I could probably do a bullet list for the real one. Well, we go basically in the order of the high-level presentation here. So authentication is an issue we've got right now, and there's a lot of solutions floating around right now. We've got people losing control of their server databases, and this is particularly a problem in combination of multiple server databases. Typically, we're using passwords, and users just choose bad passwords. They reuse passwords. They forget their passwords and other problems. And they could even have their personal password databases stolen as well as their passwords stolen directly by various means, in addition to losing control at the server side. Now, a lot of the solutions we see to this, so you see a lot now is a lot of second factor authentication. What I want to talk about is next generation authentication. This could work with second factor, although in many cases we will get better systems. Welcome R5, thank you for those as well. You'll get better base level security, so you would need second factor for fewer types of applications. You can save that for the really important ones. So I'm Wendable. I got interested in this a while ago just because passwords are kind of awful. I do cool stuff at these places, and I'll have links later on if you need to look stuff up. And we're doing a lot of talking this time. Which is going to mean a lot of water. So the first point that we are concerned about is people are losing their databases left and right, and while there are recommended ways that you can minimize the damage caused by this, obviously in addition to trying to minimize losing the database in the first place, nothing is perfect. We've learned that over and over again. And there's an awful lot of servers out there that are a lot less perfect. So given that compromises are probably going to happen, we want methods that minimize the amount of damage that can be done, and we want to make that like the default way to move things. One of the issues with those, one of the ways this can cause damage is that these databases contain shared secrets. And as the expression goes, two can keep a secret if one of them is dead. So given that we're trying to share a secret between the user and the server, you've got two parties already. And the servers tend to become much more attractive targets because they contain the secrets of lots and lots of users. The solution to this is obvious to not share secrets, and one of the ways we do that is with public key cryptography. You might be familiar with this in SSH. SSH is mostly using like RSA or DSA, which is the public-private key cryptography I know about is based on the concept of one-way functions. So these are mathematical things that will take some secret value, and you can, using that, you can very easily compute something. Okay, back up. It tends to be shortened to public key cryptography. It's really public-private key cryptography. And the key thing is that with one-way function, the private key can do things very easily going through that one-way function, which is, well, we call it one-way because it's essentially impossible. Oftentimes, reversing it, in the best of cases, reversing it comes down to just brute force trying solutions. In practice, these functions may be imperfect, meaning that there are small amounts of leakage, but you try to make the search space and the problem hard enough that that little leakage amounts to a very, very small portion of the overall problem. I'm going to do a second one of this where I time things. Now, SSH was based on the one-way function of large primes. So you find a pair of numbers that has a nice relationship to each other. Pick a pair of primes, and that will allow the person who has, I'd have to look this up again. I think it's the person who has both numbers, and you share one of them as the public key. And because of some of the properties of prime numbers and logarithms, you can do things very, very easily with the numbers that you cannot do without all of the numbers. So what I'm seeing, the trend, one of the trends I'm seeing now is that SQRL, which is, and I should probably put a note about that earlier, that is a thing that I'm going to be talking about a lot because it's the one I know, but I'm also seeing these other trends. somewhere it says that I'm talking about, in particular, a system called SQRL. It's the one I know best. So it's going to come at most of these points, but it is kind of it's where I understand some of these concepts from, and where I was noticing similarities with other systems. So that's why it's kind of the center of my understanding here. I could very likely be missing some other things. So SQRL uses elliptic curve cryptography for its public-private key. And I've been seeing this showing up in the blockchain and other things. So while SSH and some of the traditional, like, what's the term? TLS certificates have been often using, like, the RSA primes algorithms. Elliptic curves are based on a different mathematical system. It has something to do with these funny shaped curves, and I think in particular the one that SQRL uses is that one right there. So I'm not a cryptographer, I'm not a mathematician. As I understand it, the idea is that a key in an elliptic curve system is a point on that curve. And you can take a tangent to the curve at that point, and that will bounce you someplace to a different point on the curve because it's kind of winding around. And since you could have arrived at that new point from any direction, it serves as sort of a one-way function. And in practice, they do this many times. So backing all the way up to that original point is considered impossible. Cryptographers are always working with, by our best understanding, we know of no efficient way to do this, to reverse this process. Occasionally there are breakthroughs that make these things a little bit easier to do, and they call that a weakening or an attack, and that's when they start thinking about moving to new crypto systems. One of the nice properties of elliptic curves is they tend to have very compact keys compared to the RSA, for instance, which where you're starting to get the 2048-bit, 2048, 4080, 4096. So what we see in SQRL and in in the cryptocurrencies is that you tend to have 256-bit keys. The author of SQRL called it 256 is the new black. So I ended up talking about efficiency first. They're also sufficiently efficient to be useful in practical crypto systems. Another property that shows up in particular in SQRL is that at least the algorithm he chose could take arbitrary keys. So whereas with the prime system you have to find two prime numbers that work well together, you can take almost anything and use it as an elliptic curve key. And it is readily available in libsodium is the library that comes out most common, which I think is like a portable version of the one that preceded it, which is called NaCl. And this is where I also need to put drink reminders in my presentation, because I tend to get a very dry throat doing this. Alright, so the use of public keys. Oh man, I need to focus more on public keys and why that's important. I just say, oh hey, it's public keys. It's one-way functions. Isn't that neat? So the expression I was using earlier is nothing to lose. So somewhere I need to talk about why we do that. It's because with the public, well, I might need to explain one-way functions. Well, it's called a public key. And the big advantage of that is that you have the public key and the private key. It's called the public key because it can be public. It allows you. So I guess I can talk about public and private keys before talking about their existence as one-way functions. So the idea is we put the public key in the server databases. It's public, or can be public. So if they get exfiltrated, it doesn't matter. But with the public key, the server can verify that the person submitting some authentication request or other signed bit of stuff has the private key. Now we're going to assume that the private key, we kind of have to assume that the private key stays private. Obviously, if it gets lost, that's an issue, but it gives us a proof that, at least given some degree of caution, that the person authenticating is probably the same person, or it's at least a person who has the same private key, which is as good as we get right now. We'll talk about some other things we can do to improve the situation a little bit later on. All right, so that is that point. And then what I was doing was wrapping up. So loss of server databases can be improved by using public keys because that gives us nothing to lose. Another aspect of our current password system that is an issue is that we tend to have people choose bad passwords that are easily guessed or well known. They reuse passwords, enabling cross-site attacks. And this leads to all sorts of trouble. We've got all sorts of password schemes. You may have heard of battery horse staple. Really what we want is random passwords, which become hard to use. Users forget them. That also tends to reinforce reuse because, hey, it's really hard to remember. One can only remember one. And reuse enables cross-site attacks. One of the current best available solutions to that, in addition to second factor, for instance, is use of password managers. So if you don't use a password manager, I really hope you have some other plan in place because that's a really good idea. So a password manager keeps all of your passwords. It oftentimes will assist in generating strong passwords so that the brute force attacks on the server side are very, very difficult. And they will tend to keep them in an encrypted database. Now you still have a password for that, but that becomes the one password to your password database. And a lot of times they will also help you. They can set you up to copy paste things, but especially with the browser extensions, they can actually set up to form fill for you. And then it starts to become what we might call like an authentication agent. And agents is one of the other themes that I'm seeing. Don't want to talk about that yet. Sometimes the agent is more of a second factor app. One of the things I ran across is, for instance, you've got like a Google app where their sort of little second factor thing is, we pop up an alert on this app and you say yes or no, I approved that. Or, that was really me. To a certain, a lot of the other things that end up being agents are actually sort of second factor. SMS authentication, for instance, can be sort of considered the phone as an agent. And one of the things that an agent can do for us is manage our private keys that are associated with our public keys and encrypt and protect and generate them in the same way that we do with our passwords, but without sharing those secrets with the server. This is something I actually first encountered with SSH. I think it was Putty had an agent. So one of the things you've long been able to do in that world is, they set up a password for your key so that it is encrypted on disk, and if someone just finds the key, they still can't get into it without your password. And the agent streamlined that by allowing you to decrypt it once, and the agent holds the decrypted or maybe less strongly encrypted key in memory to provide it on demand. This is also something I sort of picked up on this theme when we were doing Ethereum last month, where we saw MetaMask making a signed assertion to CryptoKitties, and it was acting as an agent using the private key to make a signature off of its public key to sign up to the site, essentially. And SQRL in particular uses an agent. It was initially a sort of targeted for like a phone device, and it has since moved to focusing more on a desktop client or even a browser extension that would be especially streamlined for things. Although, of course, that can open you up to if the browser or the computer gets subject to an issue, then the things that the agent is managing are potentially a bit more exposed. So it is then incumbent upon the agent to very closely guard and secure the private keys. We expect a good agent to encrypt our storage. Pass managers will encrypt and give you your 1Password to do that. And one of the things I see in SQRL, and we're kind of seeing in some other places, is the idea of multiple levels of encryption. So SQRL has encryption at rest, which is very strong, and in fact there are even levels within that. There's like your day-to-day, and actually I need to make a check on that, because I know there are some things where it will take like a minute to decrypt, and that makes it very, very hard to brute force. And I have to see if that's the daily key or the recovery key, or in how it's doing that stacking. Anyway, it has very strong encryption for your main password, and then once you've authenticated to that session, so to speak, you use a slightly lower level of encrypt, or a very easier password. For instance, it could be more of a PIN code, or at the first 4 letters of or characters of your main password. That makes it very easy as you're going to different sites and logging in to say yes, it's still me here. But like any failure at that minor version will punt you back to the hard password, which has the harder encryption and greater protections on it. So I think like one of the reason I don't use as strong a password as maybe I should in my password manager is like I kind of don't want to be typing in 16 awkward characters every single time I log in. So I think that is probably a good trend. We're also, I understand this is how, for instance, how an iPhone will require a hopefully strong account password when you first start up the device, or maybe every so many days. Most of the time, you can just use the fingerprint sensor, and just sort of unlock it, say yes, it's me, still here, and that it's a little bit safer to too many failed attempts bump back to the big hard password. Now, going along with the agent and protecting the data, this is almost a public-private key thing. And use of public keys is, well, we give the servers nothing to lose, we give the users everything to lose. The user has ultimate responsibility for their private key. If they lose that, tough. There is no password reset email here. Now, individual sites can still do out-of-band replacement of keys. Anything from they do the password reset, click this link to submit a new key, which has all of the same problems as those emails, to calling customer support, which, I mean, we already know customer support is a social engineering attack. So it's going to be up to security policies of individual, sites and services to decide how easy they want to make that out-of-band replacement. But these types of systems are going to require some degree of user training and user responsibility. There are things we can do to mitigate that, however. So one of the threats to systems is always that the user loses their information. And then we have to have means to give, the reset emails and whatnot to let them fix that, which are themselves things that users can attack with social engineering and intercepting emails and whatever else. So one of the ways we try to mitigate this is offline storage. So if anyone played with MetaMask, you may have seen, here, write down these words someplace else, because those are essentially your private key. If your hard drive dies or whatever, you can always go back to that offline storage and retrieve it or move it to a new client or whatever. So another trend I'm seeing is the use of multiple levels of keys. Where did I put? Okay, that's not touching on cold storage yet. It's only affecting loss. Yeah, okay. So you have your recovery information, so to speak. That is your offline backed up information that can be used to recover your main thing. And then that lets you get to everything else, even if you lose it. So I looked up, as just sort of looking at the broader trends, I found SpiderX Semaphore. They have the same idea as, MetaMask, where you have a series of words, but that's actually your recovery key. They have separate daily use identities and keys that are sort of what you're storing locally. And then if that ever gets lost or compromised, you go back to your recovery key to do that. SQRL has similar ideas. It will actually save a heavily encrypted sort of supermaster ultimate unlock key, and then also give you a recovery code to go squirrel away, pardon the expression, somewhere that allows you to decrypt that. Most of the time using an identity master key, which can be regenerated from your master, your supermaster ultimate identity key. And I do need to refresh myself on the terms for these. I also need to refresh my water. Oh, I didn't turn off the mic, so it beeped at me. I guess that's something I'm gonna have to work out for this. Like, just a quick trip, man. Alright, so now we're down to, and this is where Actually, we're not really using this right now. That's you. Okay, so now, and this also is you, and splitting the keys like this is especially useful when we get to theft of user info. So last month there was discussion of cold wallets when using blockchain currencies because there is not built-in multiple levels in the cryptocurrencies. If somebody does manage to get a hold of your wallet, of your private key, they'll just take your money and it's gone. There is no built-in recovery there. So what people do is they sort of bootstrap multi-level keys with just different accounts, where you periodically transfer funds to your cold wallet, and then hopefully very, very regularly connect to that to pull stuff out, or irregularly. So that's a form of having levels. It's just not in an explicit. Now, some of those doesn't have very explicit cryptographic relationships between the keys. This is just using different keys for different purposes, which actually could probably still work in any other system. You just have a key you rarely use that signs assertions about, well, you'd still have to have the public key to that one floating around to say, this is my authoritative account to make changes to my lower level account. Anyway, especially in the cold wallet, sort of implicit levels of security. It's based all out on how you manage it. In some of these other systems, you have very explicit, master and child accounts with very specific rights and things that they can do. And one of the things that you might see in a higher level account is the ability to replace or rotate the keys of a lower level account. So in Semaphore, for instance, they have the concept, the identity never changes, but they have the concept of a key ring that contains signing keys and encryption keys and everything else you actually use on a day-to-day basis associated with that account. So rotating that essentially replaces everything that someone would care about or be able to use. Now in SQRL, they actually do replace the identity because the identity essentially is the public and private key. So that the master key, the keys you use on a daily basis are directly cryptographically derived from your ultimately identity unlock key. And then you create what your daily use identity master key. And then the protocol provides means to replace the identity master keys if you should ever believe that your identity was stolen somewhere or exfiltrated or compromised in some way. So there is an explicit way to add additional information to when you sign up at a site that says, okay, here is the locking information. You should never replace my identity unless I can make this additional signature that comes from my higher level account. When you are contacting a site, you can submit not only your current identity and identity signature, you can also submit a previous identity and identity signature. So if you go to a site and it doesn't know you by current identity, but it doesn't know you have a previous identity, you can discover that and then submit a unlocking signature along with both of the signatures of the two identities and say, okay, yes, it's really me. I have the ultimate authority to upgrade this. Please replace that key. But someone without your top level key, your identity unlock key, would not be able to make that replacement assertion and take over your account in that way. What anyone, you or an attacker, could do is disable an account. So there's a small denial of service there, but it allows you, without having to go get your identity unlock key from your safe deposit box or whatever, to go around and disable all of your important accounts if you think you were compromised and make sure that no one else can use them. and then re-enabling it will require that identity unlock key, presumably also with updating to a new key. All right, so that is as far as we've taken the main content so far. Actually, stream is at 36 minutes. That was some startup time. Some wandering about, but that might actually be about right. So now what we have to do is we have to start taking a fudge through it, rearranging everything. And I might have to do some more hardcore timing of individual segments. But if that actually works out, then that could be a good base. Alright, so this is probably going to be very awkward on the camera. I mean, I'm not sure if it's readable anyway, but I'll be kind of going through, as I'm doing it, I'm going to be body blocking it a bit as I rearrange stuff. So what I need to do is I need to get a much easier to read timer up. That is, I'm usually doing this, yeah, my numbers are set up for a count up, so what I want is a stopwatch. And a drink of water. Okay, so we have a number of, actually you don't see that. Actually, so let's pause, I'll work this out. Can I set this up? That didn't pause, well, good enough. I don't know, nope, that's not going to be in view. I don't have a good place to put up in view. Oh well. So we've got a number of issues with our current authentication systems. We have the risks to theft of the server database, which can often not only compromise that site, but other related sites. And I can already see that that is going to take up that whole first point. We have, especially with passwords, people just choose bad passwords and weak passwords or reuse passwords. All right, I might need to do some pre-rearrangement here. So if in fact that is going to be that way, then these go off, and this stuff goes offline for possible later use. So if we assume that we're close to 30 minutes, then this is actually going to spread out over that kind of distance. So we're supposed to leave some time for like Q&A and stuff, which means we currently have about 4 points. So that breaks down to like 7 minutes each, so we'll get this stuff over here. Now, I don't know, I'm kind of going to move this stuff up as we get there. Oh no, I'm breaking my order down. No, I did have rotation up here, didn't I? Alright, so that'll put us back around there. Actually, the first half will be to 15. This is the second half. Estimated, rough, maybe. Just to get things closer to where they'll be, so I'll have room to move things around. And then you'll move down a little bit, unfortunately. So we're going to have the introduction, so probably actually you'll be a little bit more. Yeah, that's going to kind of break this one over that spot. And this might actually end up being a bigger section, so we'll see. But we're going to have intro, maybe 2 minutes. I'll put us down to like 9. Well, this is already set up where it might be going down a little bit. Well, we'll just have to not deal with that for now. So somewhere around here, so at the intro, we're going to really be pushing off the edge here. So you'll be moving down a couple, at least. And it looks like that initial outline is going to take up some time. This will be in here somewhere. And then we'll just have to keep refining that. All right, so reset. All right, so we've got a lot of threats to online security, and I'm particularly looking at authentication. We have loss of server databases, not only exposing that site, but sometimes for other sites where the same users are located. And that has a lot of issues, and only one of the issues there is authentication, but it's an issue. We have, with password-based systems, we have just weak passwords, bad passwords, reused passwords, which actually like multiplies with lost databases a lot. We have, you know, now, yeah, we passwords. Not only can the servers lose them, but the users can lose them, and we want ways to a certain extent, we're going to educate users to improve that. And even individual users can get their information stolen not only from websites, but you know, individual client attacks as well. So right now we're at like here. So what we want to talk about is next generation authentication, and in particular, I'm going to be talking about a system called SQRL. It's kind of the thing I got into because I was so concerned about passwords, and so I was frustrated with passwords. And it is the basis from which I'm trying to understand everything else. So that's going to come up a lot. And, you know, also a filter on what things I've noticed. So caveat there. Hi, I'm Wendable. I do cool things with cool stuff. You can find me here, and I'm going to have a set of links to the various resources I'm going to refer to, which I actually have to get more of that in there as I do slides. So we're actually right now up around here. So the first big threat we're looking at is theft of the server databases, which exposes all of the authentication information on that site. There are steps sites can take to minimize that damage. Hashing and salting passwords, possibly encrypting user data. What history has proven, however, is that not only is no security perfect, there's always new flaws being discovered, even in the most well-regarded systems. But many, if not most, systems are much, much less perfect. So we would like to establish a paradigm where those situations have much less impact. And what we have right now is a situation where the database starts storing shared secrets. You know, like I said, you know, hopefully hashed and salted, sometimes not, which exposes the shared secrets. And as the expression goes, two can keep a secret if one of them is dead. So we would like to not share secrets if at all possible. one of the ways we can do that with, and we want to make sure that sites have nothing that they can lose. And the one way we do that is with public keys and public-private key cryptography. This allows us to say that we give the site a public key, while the user retains a private key, and as its name implies, never shares it. So they can hopefully keep that secret. And with a private key, you can make assertions that can be checked with the public key. But we believe, or cryptographers believe, by their best, by everything they know, there is no other way to do certain things except the person who has that private key. You might be familiar with these through SSH. Yeah, we kind of want to... yeah, so these work by... So I'm a little bit off time here. I'm going to lose some time here just to shuffling notes. These work by one-way functions. Mathematically speaking, they work by one-way functions, which is... That's going to overlap with this a little bit. I just need to introduce that concept sooner. So we talk about, which means that mathematically you can go one way from the private key to the public key and those operations, and cryptographers believe. Let's go through off our time a little bit. We'll work with this for now. You might be familiar with public and private key cryptography from SSH. That uses, I believe that only uses the RSA or DSA style systems, which are based on prime numbers. That is the one-way function that, so those are kind of conflated actually. The sort of one-way mathematical system that they use. What SQRL uses and what some of these other systems use is elliptic curves. Different mathematical cryptography family. So much talking. They look something like this, and in particular, I'm not sure about some of the cryptocurrencies, but I know SQRL uses, I think it's this one from what I can figure out. And very, very broadly, I think, as I understand it, well, the idea is that a key is a point on one of these curves. And from there you can take a tangent and go to a different point, because it kind of winds around itself. You'll have another crossing. And since you could have arrived at that new point from many different points, that is your one-way function. You're not sure how you got there. And what they'll actually do is they'll iterate this many, many, many times, for further obscuring that path and making it so you never really know how to get back to the original point. Elliptic curves give you very compact keys, whereas like some of the RSA and whatnot, you're getting to 2048, 4096 bit keys. Elliptic curves are generally considered to be very secure at 256 bits. So you see this in the cryptocurrency wallet addresses. You see it in SQRL. I think it was in BitTorrent, maybe BitTorrent. So the author of SQRL said 256 bits is the new black. It's also reasonably efficient to compute. And in the context of SQRL, we also have the benefit of having arbitrary private keys. And it is, as this is becoming more popular, you're seeing there's implementations most places and most environments. Very often you'll see libsodium, which is a more cross-platform version of NaCl, which I believe preceded it, one of the original implementations. So far, yeah, it's running around about 9. So, uh, so public keys is one of the big public-private key, and especially elliptic curves, one of the big themes I'm seeing. Separately, I mean, passwords themselves, besides being a shared secret, just have a host of problems. Users tend to choose weak passwords, and of course they leak and get put into big databases. Getting ahead of myself. So you have all sorts of password schemes to try and make things that are memorable and hard. You may have heard of battery horse staple, for instance. Now, but really, ideally, passwords would be essentially random, making them really, really hard to guess. Problem is with really hard things is that they tend to get forgotten, and if you don't want to have to remember a whole lot of them, you might try to use one, which means you're reusing it, which creates cross-site issues. So passwords are just why I got interested in SQRL, because it's that bad. One thing that we have to try and deal with that is password managers, which will allow you to generate good passwords. They will keep all of the passwords because you want to have unique ones for every site. It will generally encrypt those passwords for you, and then you will get that benefit of having a single password to decrypt that vault. And many times they will also be able to do form fills for you, either providing copy paste or a browser extension that can do direct form fills for you. So this is where it starts to become more of an agent, and that is one of the other trends I'm seeing between various security apps and wallets. So for instance, Google has an app that will, when you want to log in or authenticate something, it will pop up on your phone app, and you say, yes, that was really me. I approve that action. What's that? And then one of the things that an agent can do is it can try to manage your public keys for you. So I first encountered this, in fact, when SSH, which also uses public keys. One of the things that SSH keys can do is the file can be encrypted, as with the agent's database. But you would have to enter that password every time you used it, and an agent would load that up, prompt you once, and then be able to provide the signatures on demand from that, in-memory key. So one of the places we see this is in, if you've used like MetaMask, that is a wallet. It is keeping your private key and, making signatures and operations using that to perform transactions for you. It is also how the SQRL operates. It is a client and agent that keeps your key and manages it and runs the protocol and makes the signatures on your behalf. Now, if as these agents become managing our passwords or our keys, one of the things that becomes incumbent upon them is to secure our private keys. So that's iffy with drinks and stuff, but we'll run with it for now. So we will ask the password managers, you want to see encryption. So you'll obviously need something to decrypt it, be it a password or a hardware token. And one of the things I'm seeing that I like for usability on that is the idea of multiple levels of encryption. SQRL, for instance, has a very slow, hard encryption. And slow is important because it makes it harder to brute force. That it uses most of the time. But once you've done that and sort of authenticated the session, you have a much shorter, I think they're using like the first four characters of your big long password, for instance. that allows you to say, yes, it's still me here, I want to do this action. But if that gets failed once, then you're back to the hard master password. Time. Now, going along with all of this, and this sort of goes back to public keys, although it's also important with a password manager database. The user is responsible, not only for their encryption password, but for their file that has all of this stuff. And in private key systems, it's really, really important, because that's the only copy. There is, did we already cover? I don't know if we covered that. Maybe with nothing to lose because the user can lose it anyway. If they lose it, it's gone. You can do out-of-band customer support, which will have all the same vulnerabilities to social engineering and whatnot. So that's up to the application. We can try to take some steps to protect users against loss of user information. That one actually hit. And if that goes faster, then maybe that'll move up anyway. One of the ways, yeah, because this goes into loss. All right. We can help protect against this is, some of it's education. Some of it is during setup, say, you need to put this offline somewhere safe. No, really. Are you sure you did this? I think the square plan is going so far as making you re-enter something with copy-paste disabled. It's a little bit hardcore, but, you get one chance to save this information and it's gone. So we saw this a little bit. If you played around with MetaMask, you have a series of words that you need to write down and put somewhere safe. And in that case, I believe that is, I don't know if it's the key, but it's information that can get the key. It is, that's it. That is your account. The private that can recover your that recovers that's theft anyway. So that is your account. What we see in some of the other systems, and it can sort of be done with cryptocurrency, is we have multiple levels of keys. So it is not that your private key is the thing. It is that your recovery information is separate from your sort of daily use. One of the things I found looking up related systems is SpiderX Semaphore. It's a messaging system. It's a little bit different, but it has authentication in it. They also have a recovery code, which is words. But that is a separate thing, which allows you to get to more of a daily use thing, but you're never, the recovery information is never stored anywhere outside of, where they tell the user to squirrel it away, pardon the expression. So you have more of a daily use thing, and this is where this got moved. Now in Semaphore, so you have your recovery key, you've got an identity, and they've actually got a key ring, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. In SQRL, we are actually rotating. No, that's more for later. SQRL has a recovery code, but that is not the identity. It is a, and I think they also have a way to back up the data, but it's like the recovery code, then it is a heavily encrypted copy of your super master ultimate identity unlock key. Most of the time you're using what they tend to call a identity master key, which is then used to derive all of your regular authentication keys. You should never need to replace your identity master key, but you can using your higher level. All right, cool, and we're actually ahead there. Now, in addition to simple loss, we also have to consider theft. So recovery codes are great, but if that is, so for instance, in your Ethereum wallet, you've got that thing backed up, but that is your key. If somebody does get into your MetaMask or otherwise get your private key, I'll take your money. It's gone. So what we talked about last month is the idea of cold wallets, where it's just a different account. There's no relationship between them necessarily. It's just you send your larger amounts there, and very, very rarely bring that online to transfer money out. So that gives you a degree of protection, but it's not a built-in feature. What we see in some of these other, in some of the authentication systems, and my head's right in the way now, is we have levels and rights, and now I need my timer over here, associated with these accounts. So they have built-in relationships between these things. So you've got your recovery code that derives or somehow controls your master identity. And there's a definite relationship between those, and you assign different rights to the different levels. And usually there is a provision in there. One of the rights granted to your top level key is the ability to replace or rotate keys or somehow manage your lower level keys in the event of a compromise. So in Semaphore, and we are at the end of there, for instance, they have key rings. So your account ID associated with your recovery information is always the same. But everything of concern, your signing keys, your encryption keys, other important information, is stored in a key ring, and there is a provision for the recovery code to allow you to rotate your key ring, replacing all of those keys, which effectively cuts out anyone who may have gotten your previous key ring information. So I am going to run out of time a little bit. There's always Q&A. In SQRL, there is not a key ring per se. It is replacing what we call a SQRL identity, but the identity is essentially your signing key. Since SQRL is only authentication, it only deals with the signing portion, so that pretty much is your key ring, your identity. At the top level, you have the identity unlock key, which is your ultimate level with the authority to replace what they tend to call the identity master key, even though which is more of your daily driver signing key. And the protocol has provisions within it to handle the management and replacement of these lower level keys. So when SQRL signs up with the site, you pretty much should be also providing an additional lock information, which says, okay, this is what amounts to a public key information. So you should only allow certain high-level operations if you have this additional level of signature on top of the basic identity signatures. That includes the provision that you can provide not only your current identity and signature, but your previous identity and signature, your previous identity key. And then there's then if you meet the higher level unlock requirements, you can actually replace the keys that the public key the server knows you by. Additionally, SQRL has a provision to disable accounts. This enables a possible denial of service attack from an attacker, but it also enables you, with only your regular level of access, to disable your accounts, cutting out access until you can get to your safe deposit box or whatever, to get your upload your identity unlock key, and then go around and enable and replace identities in all of those sites. All right, so right now we're running at 24 minutes. I probably won't elaborate so much, but I will fill that out. And that does give us lots of room for Q&A time. And that could be a good thing with this. Or I could look at some of the other threat models that I've got, which currently includes phishing, which means attempts to get your information, which is partly covered by public keys. I can maybe bump that up. We've got privacy and tracking, which is something that's a little bit more peculiar to SQRL, because it actually does per site keys. And also theft of related databases. If they're all known by the same public key, they can do some correlation. We've got network man in the middle. We've got untrusted computers. I guess maybe I should have moved this over when I was facing away. We've got ease of use. And second factor attacks, including like SIM hijacking. That's almost as much a social engineering attack. Actually, what I might want to do is go hit up the group, maybe a little bit later this afternoon, and try to see if any of these topics sound especially interesting to my audience. So I do want to nail down this stuff a little bit better. And if that's good enough, I could even start working on some slides for that soon and starting to get a little bit organized. And then I could, as time allows, try to build out some of these topics as possible extra topics, or to fill in the space. But because I was like moving a lot of notes this time, and if that affected my timing, then I'm going to have to be shuffling them up. So we're going to try to look for where our timing stabilizes to get a sense of how much we have left. And also, I don't have to do exactly 30 minutes. It could be just a lot of time for Q&A and bonus topics. But yeah, querying for what people want to hear about would probably be actually a really good idea. All right, so I'm going to take a short break. I've been drinking a lot of water. I also need to get more. And then I'm going to try and get at least one more run through in this morning. Try and fix things out to see where our time sits. Hopefully come across a few more holes I need to fill in. Yeah, I need to get one more run in, which should be about, well, 25 minutes, 24 minutes. And then I should really get some exercise at some point, and then, this might be going good enough I can do some gaming this afternoon. Probably means I'm going to have to be back at it tomorrow morning, though. This is definitely my break off. Anyway, I'm going to be back in a minute or two. Microphone on, BRB off. Okay. So you need to reset the timer, get that back, no, let's pause, get that back in my field of view over here. And we kind of expect these to bump up a little bit, as we have to do a little bit less moving, although if I'm bumping everything up, it'll be about as much moving. I've also thought of some points where I might want to elaborate, because I kind of wanted to touch on some of the algorithms and things. And hashing actually is a big thing. Maybe at multi-level keys. Because that's either using a public key derivation or a hash function. Also the words get into hashing. Or also that gets into passwords, storage. We'll have to see if there's a good place to talk about that. I can just start by mentioning it. Anyway. Alright, authentication is challenging. We've got a lot of threats out there in the world. We hear at a regular basis about people losing control of their databases full of authentication and other information. With passwords in particular, they're just a mess. They tend to be weak, reused, forgotten. And I'm wondering if I should be mentioning my solutions as I go here. That would sure be a better outline. People sometimes forget their passwords or otherwise lose their authentication information. And we want to kind of figure out what are good practices to help with that. And other times they have that information outright stolen or exploited by malware. Hey, Dog and Lake, how's it going? Are you actually there, or is that just carryover from last night? Anyway, as you can see, some people like him. He's a pretty cool guy, does a lot of Oxygen Not Included, and 1 Hour, 1 Life, and occasionally some other things. He usually keeps a pretty good conversation. Alright, so we were at left of information. Sometimes it is outright stolen by malware or other means, and we would like to have means in place to correct that and repair it as quickly and effectively as possible. So what I'm going to be looking at is some of the trends I've noticed, and I'm buying for next generation authentication. And this is by no means exhaustive. I'm just not in that world a lot. What I did notice was something called SQRL. It's an authentication system that it's like, well, that would be a lot better than passwords. But that sort of is my basis for what things I've been paying attention to, and what things I know, what things I've noticed, and what things I understand. So caveat there. Hi, I'm Wendable. I do cool things with cool stuff. You can contact me here, and I'm going to have links, a set of bookmarks afterwards if you want to look up any of my references. So the first threat I'm going to talk about today is we see these databases being lost on a weekly or almost daily basis, unfortunately. So we want to have schemes that make this as low impact as possible. One of the issues we have right now is that very often the servers are storing shared secrets in the form of passwords. Now, best practices are to make sure that these are hash consulted and maybe even encrypting other information to minimize the damage. Well, we know two things about security from the ample experience at this point. Systems are not perfect, and many, if not most, systems are much, much less perfect, which is to say not hash consulted or improperly done. And so what we really want, given that, it's a shared secret, as they say, two people can keep a secret if one of them is dead. We want to have no shared secrets. We want to have nothing that the server can lose that would compromise authentication. Now, these databases often contain personal information and other things, which is where you get into, you want to encrypt things. Today we're talking about authentication. The way we can have nothing to lose is with public and private key cryptography, where the server is given only a public key, which is, as the name implies, it's public. It doesn't matter if it's exposed. And then the user has a private key with which they can make operations, assertions, signed statements that can be verified using the public key, but to the best of our cryptographers' knowledge, cannot be produced except by having the private key. These are implemented mathematically with one-way functions. A lot of the ones that we've seen are based on difficulty of factoring primes. So the one-way function there has to do with things you can do very, very easily if you know what the primes are. And I think maybe the public key is like one of the two primes, makes it easier to figure stuff out. Anyway, the important thing is that the properties of primes and logarithms make it really, really easy to go one way and very, very difficult to go the other. You might be familiar with these in the form of SSH, which uses RSA and DSA, which I believe are prime-based algorithms. But one of the trends I'm seeing is with the newer systems is that we're seeing a different family of functions called elliptic curves. They look and they graph sort of like this. And I think the one SQRL using is approximately with that set of parameters there. And very, very broadly, the concept here is you've got a curve. A key is a point on the curve. You can take a tangent to that, and that will bounce you to a new point. But since you could have gotten to that point from multiple places, so that becomes your one-way function. You iterate that, bouncing around a lot of times, and the point you're at doesn't tell you anything too terribly useful about the point you started from. So that's as far as I understand it. I'm not a cryptographer or a mathematician. But the useful properties of elliptic curves are that we get very, very compact keys. The prime-based systems you're starting to hear about, 2048 and like 4096-bit certificates in order to, stay ahead of the attacks and computing power that's being put against them by people who want to break these things. So you see it in SQRL, you see it in cryptocurrencies. I think BitTorrent Sync, lots of other places. One of my references is actually all the places that are using the particular, just the one particular curve that SQRL is using. So the SQRL author has said 256 bits is the new black. These algorithms are also reasonably efficient to do the the signing in, the signature checking, and such. So that's very. So they're efficient while still being strong, even though it's efficient. It would be efficient for them to attack potentially as well. At least the particular variant SQRL uses also allows the use of arbitrary private keys, which is it takes advantage of in one feature, which I aren't necessarily going to hit today, but it's a neat feature. And implementations are readily available. The most common one is called libsodium, which I think just derived from a less portable library called NaCl. So that it's available most places, has binding in lots of languages. And drink time. But so far I'm right on time, which is interesting. So another aspect of our current systems is that we have are based on passwords, and which are so secure that we're seeing lots of attempts at second factor. Today we're focused on first factor stuff primarily. So with passwords, people choose weak passwords, which tend leading to password schemes like battery verse staple. But really, ideally, to make them strong, you just want to have essentially random characters, which makes them hard to remember. People forget them, people reuse them because they can't remember a lot of them, which leads to cross-site attacks. So really what I use and what I recommend is a password manager, which can generate strong passwords, can keep keep track of them. It can typically should be encrypting them so that you have your one password, but that is to decrypt your password vault. And typically, they also make available functionality, especially in like a browser extension or something, not only to copy paste passwords for places, but to actually do form fills for you, which makes it really, really easy to use. Now, they're still managing shared secrets, which can get out and compromise, which can make it easier to get out. They help you keep unique passwords, which helps keep that from propagating. But the whole lifecycle management of passwords turning to more of an agent. It is completely managing your passwords for you. And agents is kind of this trend I'm seeing, both from password managers to other authentication apps. Google, for instance, has one where it pops up the app on your phone. It says, "Hey, did you really want to sign into this thing? Yes or no?" Man, so much talking. And agents also come into play when we start talking about public keys, because, or even more so private keys, because the agent is what manages your private key and can often, will be making signatures on your behalf. Agents can of course be, there's hardware or software, yep. I first encountered public keys, or agents in PuTTY, which includes SSH support. So oftentimes with SSH, your private key can be encrypted. And let me do a little bit louder. So you'd have a password to unlock it, but you would have to enter that password every time you use the key for something. So the agent would decrypt the key and then keep it around to make signatures for you, so that you didn't have to be doing it all the time. Another type of agent you may have seen if you were playing around with Ethereum last time, or the other cryptocurrency systems, is the wallet. It keeps your private key for you. You unlock that once, and then it makes your signatures and transactions for you. SQRL also operates in sort of agent format. It generates, manages, encrypts your keys. It makes signatures and operates the protocol on your behalf. Now, the thing about having an agent is that it then becomes incumbent on the agent to secure the private key and all of your information. I think I mentioned that, with password managers and such, you expect them to be encrypting your information. And one of the things I know SQRL does, and may be a good idea, is to have multiple levels of encryption. This is actually as much of an ease of use as anything, but essentially, at rest, when you're not using it, we use very, very strong, slow to process encryption. But you wouldn't want to, wait a minute every single time you used it. So then once you've done that once, you kind of keep it around in a faster format with an easier unlock. So SQRL, for instance, I think it'll take the first 4 characters of your password. Essentially, you've got a little unlock code. But if that fails once, then you stop and require the full password again. I believe iPhones do something similar where you need your password at startup and maybe every couple days, and then a fingerprint or PIN could unlock it on a session basis. Now, even with the agent helping you out, there is still a large amount of user responsibility involved in these things. You have to keep your files, you have to hopefully use a good manager that's doing encryption and things for you. And especially with private key crypto, you've got the private key, it's not anywhere else. Maybe the site can have out-of-band methods for you to replace it, but if the information is lost, that private key's gone. So you've got to be very careful about that. It puts a lot more responsibility on the user. You could have out-of-band means, but then that's possibly opening it up to social engineering attacks and the like. So one of the things I'm kind of seeing with these types of things is you sort of strongly recommend offline storage. If you tried out MetaMask, you may have seen that it gave you a couple of words that recommend you put them somewhere safe. That is effectively your private key at that point. Your wallet, your important stuff. What I'm seeing in some of the other systems is that you have actually multiple levels of keys. So you have your sort of recovery master key that gets kept safely offline, and that can get you back to your daily use stuff. One of the things I found, and I'm not an expert, but I found some stuff doing similar things. Semaphore is a secure messaging application, so it's not authentication per se, but it includes authentication. They also have a recovery code that is in the form of words, but that is keying your recovery code, which is at a level above your primary identity. And then below that, they have an identity with a key ring of your sort of daily use stuff, and it's a separate thing. But that allows you to sort of back up a level if you've lost your daily use stuff and regenerate it or get back to it or replace it. SQRL, I believe how it works is that it's actually storing your key, but then it's giving you a recover code which allows you to decrypt that key. And that's something I need to double check actually. But from that you get what they generally call an identity master key, which is what you're using on a day-to-day basis. Now, multi-level keys also start to come into play, in particular, when you start looking at theft of user information, because that's simply having offline storage is great if you lose it, but if somebody else steals it, you not only need to maybe recover yourself, you need to stop the other person from using it. We saw a little bit of this, you may have seen with talk of cold wallets. I'm currently running a little bit ahead here. I'm not sure exactly where that happened. With use of cold wallets with cryptocurrencies. So there's no explicit multi-level accounts in the wallets in the cryptocurrency systems, but essentially you just have a separate account that's acting as your sort of higher level account. You know, that sort of keeps the bulk of your reserve amount, and then you access it rarely to move that stuff back. I may have had a bit of a delay there. So what we see in some of these other systems is levels and rights. You have your higher level accounts, which have the rights to make replacements and such. To replace identities or to rotate keys. If you experience a loss and need to make changes. So in the semaphore context, and this is maybe even down there, they have the concept of key rings, where they maintain identity if you need to replace it, but your recovery code allows you to dropped a few frames there. Allows you to rotate the keyring. And the keyring holds like your signing key, your encryption key, other important information. It's effectively everything you actually use. So just having like your identity wouldn't really help an attacker. They need all the stuff in the keyring. So your recovery key gives you the cryptographic authority to replace the keyring. We're still at 20 minutes. Okay. SQRL does, in the terminology, it is identity replacement. So that would be, I guess, identity rotation. But for SQRL, I mean, the identity is your signing key, and the only thing you're doing with SQRL is signing identity assertions. So it's kind of accomplishing a very similar thing. SQRL will have what they call it. No, it actually did get bad. All right, let's pause this for a moment. Well, still a little bit of a burst. I might want to cut out some previews though, just to take some load off my internet. See if that helps a bit. Also, oh well, no, I can't cut that off because that's actually I'm not using that right now, but we'll see if that helps. All right, drop below, so leave the alarm on. All right, so we were at, let me try to get that up here so I can watch it. Okay, that seems to have helped a bit. All right, so we were at identity unlock key. So SQRL calls the master the identity unlock key, and there's a recovery code that helps you get back to that. It derives the identity master key from that. And there is a provision when introducing yourself to a site to say this is the key and the signature with that key that you know me by. And here is an additional locking information which will help you verify higher level signatures in the event that we need to replace or update or perform more privileged operations on the account. So there's also provision to provide not only a current identity and signature, but a previous identity. And then with the identified by either, and then with your privileged signature, you can say, okay, I want to I want to unlock my account in order to replace identities, and then relock it again with the updated information. Additionally, there is a facility to disable accounts temporarily. This could, of course, be and this requires a lower level authorization. It could be used to denial of service by attacker, but the real intent is that if the attacker has your account, you want to disable it anyway. So if you find out you're compromised, you can quickly go around and disable things that are especially important, and then later when you can get to your safe deposit box and get your recovery code, you can then go back to update your keys and re-enable the accounts. All right, so that is getting us just into 23 minutes. We'll also have to we'll probably spend a minute or two on summary wrap-up, actually. So I can query my audience for topics of interest, and perhaps also develop those as extra stuff. So we're going to have essentially a repeat of the outline. I could break this out in individual points, but I mean that's the idea right now. So review what we talked about. All right, I'm done with you for the time being. That back on charge. All right, I am going to. That is going to be rehearsal and practice for this morning. That was actually close enough. I could probably start roughing that into slides while I query people. And we'll have another go at rehearsal tomorrow morning. All right, so this is the one that will not yell at me for a long time. I'm actually going to be back in let me be back for a little bit for something very different. I should get some exercise. I'm going to play Stepmania. I'm not going to play it on YouTube because they're very, very harsh on the music. I don't want to have trouble with that. But I'll be back at least for this stuff, and I don't know, maybe other times. So let's see if I can survive this to see what my lag is. So yeah, I will be back on Twitch in a little bit to play some Stepmania. It's going to take a while to reconfigure cameras and OBS and everything else. So I'll get back up as soon as I can, and then get the map stuff figured out. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks to Arc5, McRime, Doggle Lake, SES Dev, One Jellybean, Catnox, Osarak, SES Dev, Haskin TV. I think it moves around on me. Anyway, thanks for all the hosts. Thanks for all the fish. I'll be back in a little bit, and I don't have. I guess this is my signal. Bye.